are standing at the border like Nazis, going, you here, you here.
I've been sending babies and other young children. Oh, I think I'm going to have to hand this off.
Tucker's been one of the most sort of aggressive at putting forward what a lot of people have seen as a pretty blatantly white nationalist view of what immigration should be like.
Democrats say a lot of stuff, but one of the things they like to be especially dishonest about is immigration. But it's not just Democrats. One of the side effects of Trump derangement syndrome is the pathogen infects everything it touches, even those token conservatives who are friendly with the mainstream media. So here's a video of anti-Trump conservatives and Democrats just saying stuff about immigration.
It makes it sound like the caravan's going to come in and bust through a gate of some sort and then go ravaging in the country. Well, the reality is the reason they're in a caravan is because they're seeking asylum. So if they wanted to sneak into the country, they wouldn't do it in a giant caravan. So that caravan actually, in a way, should be celebrated because they are not going to cross the border illegally. They are going to go to a port where you ask for asylum.
Hundreds of immigrants tried to storm the border. So we were told, as you recall, that immigrants would not, in fact, try to storm the border in this migrant caravan. And here is what it sounded like when hundreds of people tried to storm the border between Tijuana and the United States. So you can see these folks breaking through a fence, running across no man's land toward the next fence. And Border Patrol showed up. And then it got even worse. There were some folks who were actually physically throwing rocks at members of Border Patrol, which was just delightful. So you can see, here's a guy picking up stones, turning around, and trying to throw it at Border Patrol. You can see them trying to fling the stones over the fence at Border Patrol. Now, once you do that, Border Patrol agents have every right to defend themselves. Simone Sanders, another commentator on CNN, she said, reminder, these are asylum seekers. The United States government is attacking asylum seekers. And this is after Chris Sherman of the Associated Press tweeted, U.S. Border Patrol has just launched tear gas into Mexico, breeze carrying it hundreds of yards, parents running away with choking toddlers, hashtag migrant caravan.
It makes it sound like the caravan's going to come in and bust through a gate of some sort and then go ravaging in the country. Well, the reality is the reason they're in a caravan is because they're seeking asylum. So that caravan actually, in a way, should be celebrated because they are not going to cross the border illegally.
This caravan that Jim, look at me, I'm Jim Acosta, told us was not an invasion, and they charged over. And U.S. Border Patrol agents used tear gas to disperse hundreds, these guys are from Honduras originally, hundreds of Central American migrants at the Mexican city of Tijuana who made a rush for the border fence. So they put in a picture, which I think will probably win the Pulitzer Prize. It's a woman carrying her children away from the tear gas. You see the tear gas. You see this poor woman with her poor children running away from the tear gas. If you look in the background, all the rest of the guys are there. They're all men. They're all men. So the whole thing is an illusion. And this photographer is falling for the illusion because he's an artist. That's why. And he likes the emotions that are called up by this picture.
I challenge that this was a peaceful protest or that the majority of these people were claiming asylum. We ended up making about 42 arrests. Only 8 of those were females, and there were only a few children involved. The vast majority of the people we're dealing with are adult males. Similar to what we saw the first wave of the caravan that came up about a week or so ago, the group immediately started throwing rocks and debris at our agents, taunting the agents. Once our agents were assaulted, and the numbers started growing, we had 2 or 3 agents at a time initially facing hundreds of people at a time. They deployed tear gas to protect themselves and to protect the border.
And they asked her about what this guy just said. I mean, this is a law enforcement officer who's telling he was attacked with rocks. They were mostly men. The families were put out there for the purposes of creating images. And they asked Ana Navarro what she thinks of his response.
Look, there are no easy answers here. And it's a very difficult situation, a very complicated situation. I don't find that a compelling answer. We have seen the images of the children and the women, and there has got to be a pragmatic and compassionate answer here that does not involve tear gassing children. That is not who America is. That is not what we do. We can't have these images coming out from our country.
So it's a complicated problem, but the images, and this is not who we are. I mean, in other words, we are supposed to be governed by the people who create the images, because the people who create the images are in league with, are in line with Ana Navarro's policy. So that's how we're supposed, I mean, they are making us stupid. They're making us stupid because it puts you in this position where you just want to say, like, oh, shut up. This is ridiculous.
Jon Favreau was a member of the Obama administration. He served in the Obama administration. There's a picture from 2014 that was going around of children in holding facilities. These children were unaccompanied minors, and they were put in holding facilities in 2014. Now, you may recall, 2014, who was president? Was it Trump? No, it was President Barack Obama. You remember that guy, right? He was annoying. You remember that guy? Well, that dude put all those kids in these holding facilities. Jon Favreau was working for the administration, or did work for the administration. He tweeted out the 2014 photos as though Donald Trump had put these kids in the holding facilities. Here's what he tweeted, quote, "Look at these pictures. This is happening right now. And the only debate that matters is how we force our government to get these kids back to their families as fast as humanly possible." And it's not just Jon Favreau. Sean King tweeted the same thing. Linda Sarsour tweeted the same thing. They all tweeted out these pictures, and they pretended that they were all from 2018 when they were all from 2014. Then they found out they were from 2014. A bunch of these people started deleting their tweets. So Jon Favreau got rid of his tweet because it turns out that it just wasn't true. All of which goes to show you that something weird has happened to members of the media.
The terrorizing of these little kids, that's a tactic that won't end if collectively as a Congress we give into it. He should just be a good person. He should be a human being, and he should stop terrorizing these kids.
Senator, it sounds like what you're saying is you don't negotiate with terrorists, and you're calling the president a terrorist in this scenario.
I'm not.
You're saying he's terrorizing kids. I mean, the policy is don't negotiate with terrorists because when you give them what they want, they'll only hold more people hostage or et cetera. I mean, that is what you just said. If you give the president what he wants, he'll hold more vulnerable population groups hostage.
Well, I did not call the president that name, but what I did say is what he is doing to these kids is terrorizing these kids. It is inflicting terror on them. It is fundamentally traumatizing them in a way that they will not recover from. That is an accurate description of what he is doing.
What we have right now under Trump's actions, which let's call it what they are, it's a kidnapping, right? We first kidnapped the executive order of DACA to go and get a wall that we didn't need. And now we are literally kidnapping babies at the border.
It is not the law to separate, and this is an important fact check. Yeah. It is not the law to separate parents and children at the border. That is not the law. It is their interpretation of the law. We can't find a solution to this problem without harming children, without putting them into concentration camps.
And I would even say, Stephanie, to that point, it's not even an interpretation of the law. It is a policy.
A new policy.
It is a policy that has been invoked by the President of the United States. Right. I call this a concentration camp for kids. And if this is where this country is going, the American people need to wake up and pay attention because your kids could be next. Right. Because your kids could be next. Right. Because your kids could be next. Right.
No, your kids won't be next if your kids are American citizens and not trying to come into the country. But let's step back to the beginning of what was said here, because this was something that was championed by every left-winger across the country, that separating children from parents is not the law.
And this is an important fact check. Yeah. It is not the law to separate parents and children at the border. That is not the law.
You know, you have all these fact-checking sites. You know, all these fact-checking sites like factcheck.org and PolitiFact. And half of their fact checks are just wrong. Half of their fact checks, they legitimately draw a conclusion that no one drew from an original statement, and then they say that it's half true or not half true based on whether it's a Democrat or Republican. Well, factcheck.org is going after President Trump because President Trump suggests that, hey, it's not my fault that these kids are being separated from their parents, which is true. It's not his fault. It's not his fault. But here's what factcheck.org writes. Okay, neither the court settlement nor the 2008 law require the Trump administration to break up families. They require the government to release children from custody after a certain period of detainment. The government absolutely has the option to release the parents as well, said Sarah Pierce, a policy analyst in the Migration Policy Institute. That's as long as they aren't a flight or safety risk. And then they say Trump is lying. So let me explain what that means. Okay, let me explain how stupid that is. Okay, what they are saying is that Donald Trump doesn't have to separate the parents and the children. Now, you might ask, Shapiro, you told us a few minutes ago that under the law, if you want to retain the parents, you do have to discharge the children somewhere else. Right, you do. So the left is claiming it's Trump's fault because he's arresting the parents. So if Trump really didn't want to separate the parents from the kids, he should just let them loose. He should just not detain them at all. Do you understand how insane this is? This is like complaining that children in the United States are being separated from felon parents because we arrest the felon parents. And you say, well, do you want the kids to go with? And they're like, no, but you could release the felon parents. The whole point is that Trump is enforcing the border now. Like, the only thing that Trump is doing differently than Obama is he's remanding more cases to custody than President Obama did. Obama was fine with letting illegal immigrants roam into the country, be briefly arrested, and then be released into the general population. Trump is not. But under the law, if he keeps the parents, he has to release the kids. Hey, Hillary Clinton, she comes back from the dead to call President Trump a liar and unchristian for enforcing the same policy that she was touting a few years ago. Right? She was in the administration when a lot of this policy was being touted.
Separating families is not mandated by law at all. That is an outright lie. And it's incumbent on all of us, journalists and citizens alike, to call it just that. Those who selectively use the Bible to justify this cruelty are ignoring a central tenet of Christianity.
Okay, the law does say that if you arrest the parents, you have to release the kids. That is, in fact, the law. What Democrats want is for the parents to be released as well. How do we know that? Because it turns out that in that Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruling that I've been talking about for the last several days, the one that suggested they have to release the kids, the plaintiffs in that case were saying that you should also have to release the parents. They were saying you should have to release the parents as well, because otherwise you are violating the rights of the children. So that's their actual goal here. The Democrats don't want a solution because they're hoping to leverage President Trump into backing down and just releasing people into the interior of the United States. A picture of a little girl who's crying as her mother stands there with Border Patrol, and then everything is erased and it becomes red, and then in front of her you can see President Trump, and then it says "Welcome to America." So it's a tiny 2-year-old kid screaming and crying, and President Trump kind of smugly grinning down at her because he doesn't care about the children. Well, well, well. It turns out that this entire cover is a lie. Not only is the cover wrong about President Trump's policy, which of course has been the policy in the United States since a 2016 court decision from the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, so dating all the way back to the Obama administration, kids have been forcibly separated from parents who are arrested for federal charges. It is also not true because this girl was not even separated from her mother. So they took a picture of a little girl and then they photoshopped it in to an all-red cover with President Trump in the foreground. And it turns out none of this is true. The little girl is from Honduras. She was not separated from her mother at all. She was crying because her mom was crossing illegally into the United States at about 11 p.m., and the little girl was tired and thirsty, according to Border Patrol.
And she said, yes, she's tired and thirsty. It took less than 2 minutes. As soon as the search was finished, she immediately picked the girl up, and the girl immediately stopped crying.
Okay, so the media took this photo and they blew it up and they made it seem as though the kid was crying because mommy had just been trucked away to the Nazi death camp by President Trump. Right, this is what the media did. They ran with this story. They ran with the picture. They didn't tell you the rest of the story. By the way, the guy who's speaking there, his name is Carlos Ruiz. So clearly this is a white alt-right racist from the Border Patrol who's talking about this situation. Hey, here's Reuters reporting. Reuters, not Daily Wire. Reuters, quote, "The Honduran toddler pictured sobbing in a pink jacket before U.S. President Donald Trump on an upcoming cover of Time magazine was not separated from her mother at the U.S. border, according to a man who says he is the girl's father. Quote, my daughter has become a symbol of the separation of children at the U.S. border. She may even have touched President Trump's heart," Dennis Valera told Reuters in a telephone interview. Valera said the little girl and her mother, Sandra Sanchez, have been detained together in the Texas border town of McAllen, where Sanchez has applied for asylum, and they were not separated after being detained near the border. Honduran Deputy Foreign Minister Nelly Jerez confirmed Valera's version of events. Well, not only was this kid not separated from mommy, it turns out that mommy was falsely claiming asylum. She is not, in fact, a political dissident in Honduras. In fact, she ran away from her other 3 children in Honduras. She left them there with dad. Dad has a good job. Mom was working. And yet, all of this was passed around the internet endlessly, and we were told that this Time magazine cover was just demonstrative of how America has gone the wrong way, about how everything is falling apart. Our moral status has been completely decimated. It's been completely decimated thanks to President Trump and his evil. And you see people on the left repeating this idiotic routine ad nauseum.
Immigrations Enforcement, ICE, arrested a man, an immigrant or a man, while he was driving his pregnant wife to the hospital. Every headline, I mean, everywhere was New York Times, USA Today, Washington Post, everyone writing about how ICE targets man, arrests man while he was driving his poor pregnant wife to the hospital. Okay, that's the headline.
Maria del Carmen Venegas holding back the tears.
Pues mal, me sentía muy mal en ese momento.
She says she's doing bad at this moment, and that's when you most need your husband. The mother of 5 just gave birth 2 days ago, the same day her husband, Joel Arona, was detained by ICE agents.
Dijo, ¿me puedes mostrar tu identificación? Dije, sí.
She says they asked for her ID, so she got her ID and gave it to them. And then they asked about her husband's ID. She says he doesn't have his. When he got out, they put him into custody. You could see Venegas was hysterical and had no idea what was going on.
Nunca lo ha parado la policía.
She says her husband has no criminal history and that police have never stopped him and he's never had a ticket. Venegas was forced to drive herself to the hospital shortly after she gave birth to her baby boy. While he's physically okay, this mother is living a nightmare. She says, my husband needs to be here. He had to wait for his son for so long, and someone just took him away.
They don't, by the way, they usually fail to mention that he's an illegal alien. He's not an undocumented immigrant. He's not a future American. He's not a dreamer, sleepwalker. I guess they're sleepwalkers. No, he's an illegal alien who clearly committed a crime. But that's not the best part. The best part is he's wanted for murder in Mexico. They've left that part out of it, didn't they? They left that part out of the reporting. So this guy, Joel Arona Lara, was, according to ICE, targeted and arrested because he's wanted for murder in Mexico. Here's Joe Kennedy, Joe Kennedy III. He tweeted about this. He said, there's heartless, and then there's whatever the hell this is. It's heartless, right? So you have the media put out the ostensibly true headline, man arrested driving wife to hospital. That is sort of true, but it's actually a lie because it leaves out the most important information, which is that he was wanted for murder in Mexico and that he's an illegal alien who broke our laws. So the statement on its own, out of context, that statement is true. In context, it's an utter lie. He says that, and so the mainstream media put that headline out there, and then the Democrat politician tweets it and says this is awful and uses it as campaign fodder. And this is the cycle that they use because they're working together.
Are standing at the border like Nazis going, you here, you here.
Yay! No more baby internment camps, just regular internment camps. Cool, that's what we call a win in 2018.
And if you ask yourself, what would I do if I was a Gentile in 1941 if my Jewish neighbors were under attack by the Nazis? Would I give them sanctuary? You might be about to find out what you would do. Will you pass that moral test or will you fail it?
He said, you know, the Nazis had it perfectly correct. They declared us an illegal people. That's how it began. We were declared an illegal people as Jews, right. And that follows that. And it's a very horrible thing to make these comparisons, but if you think about the level of dehumanization where we have arrived, where children are being taken, there's an arc there.
Okay, no, there isn't. You're an idiot. You're an idiot. Okay, first, I would like to point out that everybody in America seems to have read Harry Potter and once heard of people called the Nazis, and every single issue must fit into one of these two frameworks, into these two idiotic frameworks. Either everything is a Harry Potter do-over or everybody's a Nazi. Not everything you dislike is Nazi policy, gang. Read a fricking book. If you really believe that Nazi policy was to have a process of law whereby people who were illegally attempting to enter Nazi Germany were temporarily separated from their children for the protection of the children because we didn't want to hold the children in incarcerated custody, and then they were reunited with those children when people were deported, if you really think that was Nazi policy, it's because you're a moron. As far as the notion of dehumanization, it is not dehumanizing. The whole point here is that the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, the most liberal court in America, held that it is a better policy to force parents and children to be separated than to leave children with parents in custody in the first place. Again, this was not Trump coming up with, you know what would be a nefarious, evil idea if we took those kids away from those parents. That is an effectuation of law. Once you arrest people, the kids have to be removed by force. Soledad O'Brien tweeted the same thing out. Soledad O'Brien tweeted out, quote, well, I guess we've put to rest the question, Nazi Germany. Could it happen here in America?
And I also found your characterization, frankly, of the president's proposed border wall as, quote, a symbol of hate.
And my voice might be different than your voice, but we both get to voice our opinion.
But I'm not, of course, and I'm not challenging your right to say what you think, and I would defend it literally. However, I don't understand why a country's desire to protect its border is an expression of hate.
Well,
what does that mean?
The point that I'm trying to make is that the wall is not the best way to protect our border. Building a wall that is going to cost, by the way, billions of dollars of American taxpayers, my tax dollars are going to go
I'm sorry.
to build a wall
you know what? I don't have any patience for that argument because I don't think it's. Hold on.
That isn't going to protect us.
Okay.
How is the wall going to protect us?
So you're saying it's too expensive. You're saying the wall is too expensive, but you know that's not actually what you said. You said it's an expression of hate, and I just want to get to the bottom of that. Why is it hateful to want to build a wall? A lot of Americans do, the majority in some surveys. Why is that related to hate?
It is a hateful symbol. It is a symbol of hate against immigrants. It is a symbol of hate against Mexican immigrants.
But why is it a symbol of hate? Well, hold on. Why is it? I just want to get to the bottom of this, because you're throwing around language that has an effect on people's attitudes, and it's pretty heavy duty because it presumes motives that you can't know. You don't know that people who support the wall hate Mexican immigrants. A lot of people coming across the border are not from Mexico, as you know. They're Central Americans. Is it legitimate? Is it morally legitimate for an American to say, I want control of who comes into my country, and we don't have that, and so a wall will reestablish that control? For you to denounce that as hate seems a little much.
And I would absolutely welcome a conversation about how do we create a system by which people can come here legally that will benefit Americans, that will increase tax revenue, that will increase economic activity. So we should have that conversation.
We're having that conversation now, and you're not answering, with respect, you're not answering my question. You're not answering the key question here. But let's get to another question.
I am answering the question. The question
why is it a symbol of hate for people to disagree with you on the wall?
As a Mexican immigrant, I can have an opinion that that wall, to me, symbolizes a symbol
I'm merely
of hate.
asking you to explain your opinion. I'm not challenging your right to have one. I think you have a right to have any opinion you want. But I think I have a right to ask you what you're talking about, and you can't explain it. So let's move on to the next question.
Last week, about 680 undocumented aliens were arrested by ICE officials countrywide. Many of them have already been deported. The coordinated raids targeted aliens who had committed crimes in the USA, mostly felonies. 75% of those taken into custody had convictions, including homicide and rape. But those facts have largely gone unreported by the American press and by the radical left, which is actively misleading you.
How inhumane this is to be breaking down people's doors and separating parents from their children.
This is Donald Trump really executing his campaign plan. He's trying to be a tough guy, so he's going to go after, the maids, the moms, the people that are working in the shops, instead of going after the hardcore criminals.
Maids, moms, and shopkeepers, according to that dishonest politician. Now, the false news reporting actually reached the level of hysteria. We could find no headlines in major newspapers, none, that bannered the fact the raids were targeted at illegal aliens who had committed serious crimes. Committed them. That's not press bias. That's blatant dishonesty. If the federal government cannot remove aliens who commit serious crimes in this country, then we don't have an effective federal government. Yet the far left and the press, knowing full well that the ICE raids last week were directed at dangerous people, chose not to report that. They want open borders. They want alien criminals protected. They want anarchy.
A wall is an immorality. It's not who we are as a nation. And this is not a wall between Mexico and the United States that the president is creating here. It's a wall between reality and his constituents, his supporters.
What the hell does that mean? A wall between reality and his supporters? Well, how? How? I love that nobody in the media just asks how. Explain. And when she says this isn't a wall between the U.S. and Mexico, that is literally what it is. A wall between the United States and Mexico. Some sort of physical barrier that allows our Border Patrol agents to know when people are crossing illegally. And why this is immoral in any way, Democrats have yet to explain. I love that they can just shout slogans like, it's immoral and it's not who we are. Whenever a politician assures you it's not who we are, be aware that all they are trying to do is shame you into not asking the question, why? Why is it not who we are to protect our own border?
It's not who we are as a nation.
This is not America. This is not who we are.
That is not who America is. That is not what we do.
But the image is, and this is not who we are.
Whenever a politician assures you it's not who we are, be aware that all they are trying to do is shame you into not asking the question, why? Why is it not who we are to protect our own border?